Hello, everyone. Welcome to our online video series, Reading Hope in Trying Times. Our guest today is our good friend, Dr. Heather Murray Elkins. Heather is the Frederick Hannon Emerita Professor of Worship, Preaching, and the Arts of Drew Theological School at Drew University. She's a widely known United Methodist preacher and teacher in the area of worship, preaching, spirituality, and the arts. An elder in the West Virginia United Methodist Church, Reverend Elkins devotes her work to the integration of spiritual, political, and bodily life. Drawing on the spiritual resources of traditional liturgies, the arts, and Appalachian culture, she utilizes poetry, prayer, material culture, and ritual studies. She's been a teacher in the first independent bilingual Navajo school, a rural church pastor, a truck stop chaplain, a seminary faculty member, and an academic dean. Her new website can be found at alteringtheworld.com. That's altering with two A's, where she talks about the holy stuff of life. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you for that website, by the way.
Oh, certainly. I'm very happy about it myself. So, in any event, maybe you can start by sharing some of your thoughts on this whole pandemic crisis that we're going through.
Well, I went back and looked through the text that I had collected over the years, and there's one that popped out. It was done in 1640, and I only borrowed it and photographed a few pages. And it was a form of prayer that was issued in England in that time of plague. So my sense is, where we are right now, we might as well use that language of plague, because that seems to essentially draw the ways in which the normal has been shattered. And yet it has a biblical identity to talk about that evoked prayers in the past. So I find at the moment, it helps to have both memory and imagination to cope with what has absolutely shattered what we think normal is.
Well, that sounds really interesting, Heather, and it sounds like a good topic for a blog article. So we'll be watching for that soon.
All right.
So one of the things we've been doing during this series is also kind of talking about how God has helped us in challenging times in the past. Are there anything along those lines you'd like to share with us?
One of the peculiarities of both my reading and writing is how I read stuff, the material culture. And right now, I find with so many things being broken in the world, literally broken, as well as people, to pay attention to that most commonplace that is around you, and to allow that sense of recognition that we are stuff, and a lot of the stuff we have been used to has been destroyed, relationships broken. So the question is, what comes up in us? And it's one of the books I mentioned, but there is this sense of, we have an instinct as human beings to want to repair what's broken. And that gives me a great deal of hope. There's a book about, Homo reparans, this instinct on repairing the world. And certainly in the Jewish tradition, where the original light is shattered, and the task of all those who seek God and good is to gather up these broken shards, and to make meaning of, to gathering the broken light together, is, I think, a deep instinct. And out of the, Mary Oliver is keeping many of us sane these days with her words, but I've found a text that I think summarizes better than many others. Let me just read it. It's called, from the poem The Messenger. Are my boots old? Is my coat torn? Am I no longer young and still not half perfect? Let me keep my mind on what matters, which is my work, which is mostly standing still and learning to be astonished. So we are forced to stand still and to cope with the fear. We have to practice paying attention, paying attention, and um, learning to be astonished. So that's how I would say I and those I love are coping in this time.
Very interesting. But that's really great. I know that Mary Oliver is already very popular and particularly popular right now for a lot of folks.
Yes.
So speaking of which, I know you collected several books that you recommend for people right now. Do you want to go through those now?
Yes. Let me just pull them out. And again, let's assume that everyone who might listen to this is sheltering in place. So that means there are limitations on your physical activity, but then many things open up. So these I found very helpful. One is The History of Religion in 5.5 Objects by Brent. And he again takes us to the um, infinite of the finite. And his book also intersects with another. There's a whole series of these, but right now he has a chapter on bread. And here is a series called Object Lessons on Bread. And one of the reasons it came to mind, and I pulled it up for you today, is there was this weird raid on yeast in the stores. You can't buy yeast. But suddenly online, people began posting how you make yeast. You can make it. So the bread of life is possible. And to literally engage in making bread, creating life because yeast is alive, and breaking that bread is a way to answer the prayer, give us this day our daily bread. So I quite like these two texts that are linked.
That's very
And
cool.
and then here's the one I mentioned by Elizabeth Spelman: Repair, the Impulse to Restore in a Fragile World. So that would be written large over everyone's household and over every city street. How are we going to repair what has been so badly broken? Um, the other one, speaking of texts that matter, is this one of Object Lessons on Glass. And you and I are doing this work through glass. Do you know that?
Through glass?
Yes, yes. Hey,
I guess the
okay.
camera is glass, the
Right.
computer screen is glass.
iPhones and fiber optics. Where would we be without fiber optics? I mean,
Very true.
the whole world revolves these days, and what's keeping us together in this curious sheltering and yet outreach is the most commonplace of things, one of the earliest of human creations, by the way, knowing how the Syrians, ancient Syrians, were the ones who figured out how to blow glass thousands of years ago. So I just think it's the commonplace lifted up for holy use is how we work at redeeming and repairing.
That's
So
very cool. I had not even thought about glass and the use of glass and how fundamental that is.
yes, and I try to encourage those who are grieving about not being in their church to realize that they're looking through stained glass. They have stained glass. They have images coming to them that are full of the holy, um, even if they can't sit in a sanctuary. They've made sanctuary. So, at any rate, I'm very into commonplace things, as you could probably tell. So,
Wonderful. It's wonderful.
I think we are stuff. And ceremony is that which binds, it, in the Latin, it's a word that means you bind back together that which has been separated. That's the root word for ceremony. And so we're all trying to find our rituals, our ceremonies of binding um, our worlds back together.
Very cool. Well, I think you also have something that you've written, don't you, that you'd like to read for us?
And I picked this story uh, for you and for anyone who might need a good word for this time. And it's called the Pharaoh Tattoo, and it's in my book Holy Stuff of Life. And it comes from the days when I was a truck stop chaplain, which I did to help pay for graduate school. I've kept the name tag, the plastic name tag, over the years so that when I retire, I will be able to go back to this work and I won't have to order a new one. Truck stop chaplain, and a sign they gave me. The chaplain is in, and I had to put the sign on the cash register on the front of the truck stop whenever I came to work. And then I had to put the name tag on a black suit with a clergy collar because the people who hired me wanted to be very sure that the truckers could distinguish me from other women who might be working there. So, black clergy collar. Every night was new and every encounter different. And I got very good at writing blessings on napkins. So there's one story, and this is the one I wanted to share. This one will mark me for as long as I can remember. He's stirring the coffee when I sit down beside him at the counter. The men and women who drive usually sit at the counter when they're being fueled if they're not too tired or behind in their paperwork. So I sit beside him on the stool, and I notice that he doesn't even turn his head. Sometimes they don't look at me because they are shy or they want me to go away. I never know until I ask, and I look for a way to open a conversation, and I notice he's still stirring his coffee and that he has a braided tattoo like a bracelet around his wrist. It must mean something, so I ask what it means. It turns out he was in the Navy, and this is a Navy thing. I look for another door when he falls silent. I've never gotten a tattoo, I say. Did it hurt to get this one? Nah, he says, and he shook his head. Not that one, but this one. And then he pushes up his left sleeve and he turns and looks at me and he says, this one hurts like, and then he sees what I'm wearing and he changes what he says. This one hurt a whole lot. It covers most of his upper arm. The skin on the edges are still puffy and red. I studied the tattoo. It's done in 3 colors, very precise, but it's not quite what I imagined a trucker would wear. It's flowers and a bird of some kind with outstretched wings. I ask him what kind of bird it is. He stares for several moments and says, I don't know, some kind of sparrow, I think. His confusion makes me curious. So I say, you don't even know what kind of a bird that is. Why did you get that tattoo? And he starts this story about this old tattoo that he had. And could I see the woman's name with the letter S under that too? I really can't see it. Maybe the S. There, he says, you see, once I dated a girl named Sue, and I got her name tattooed on my arm before I shipped out. When I got out, I got married, but I didn't marry Sue. So my wife has hated my left arm for 18 years. So I fixed it. So he looks at this tattoo like he's seeing it for the first time. 18 years, I think. Why fix it now? And I ask. He stirs the coffee again and then begins the story. He's a steel worker. He was, third generation. He was doing well, working hard on keeping up with family and financial obligations. A strike is called. It lasted over 2 years, and when it ended, the plant was permanently closed. He had been so sure that all he had to do was hang on and find part time work until they called him back. His sense of worth shrank as the debts mounted. He took whatever open job part time was there, but a massive layoff meant there was little left for full time work. His wife had to take a night job at Walmart. He watched the kids. Then things changed for the worse. They were behind in their mortgage, the utilities unpaid. One of the kids ended up in the hospital, but of course, no insurance. He comes across a trucking brochure advertising 18 wheelers for owner operators. Buy your own truck, complete with driver training. All he needed was $10,000 for a down payment. Well, how in the world would he manage? He starts talking faster now. That's a lot of money. But I got a feeling like, and he stops and he lowers his voice and then he gestures upward with his thumb. You know, sent it. And I shake my head. It's almost 2 in the morning and I've had too much coffee. You know who? He nods again. Gesture. God, I said. You thought God sent you this brochure? Yeah, he says. I'm awake now and fascinated. I have no idea how this connects to a brand new tattoo, but I'm intrigued by someone who won't say God. Since I hear the second commandment broken every minute, his hesitation makes his story very different. So, what did you do since sent it? He made a list of 10 people, friends, who could each lend him $1,000. He'd get notes signed, he'd get the truck, he'd get on the road, pay them back in 6 months. How did that work out? Not good. I would have quit if I didn't think, and there was that thumb gesture again. I got to number 9 and they'd all turned me down. Then, well, he said, then the last guy gave me every penny I needed. I blink, take a breath. That's a miracle. But he's back to stirring his coffee and he doesn't look up. So why isn't that a miracle? I retrace my steps. It is, but not right away. He takes the money to the bank, asks for the loan officer, puts the filled out form and the cash on the desk. I'm here to buy my truck. Here's the down payment. The loan officer looks at his form, checks his credit rating, and turns him down. He asks why. His credit rating is lousy. End of story. I try to explain. I tell them I want to work. I'm a hard worker. If they loan me the money, I'll be able to work and my credit will be good again. They keep saying they're sorry. My credit rating stinks. I get mad. I apologize. They tell me the interview is over. So, he says, I go home and wake my wife up and we sit on the couch and hold hands and I say, I said, you said a prayer. Yes. Yeah, I said one of those. What did you say? I asked. If it was supposed to happen, could it happen, please? Amen. That's a pretty good prayer, come to think of it. Well, then he says, it got really crazy in about 20 minutes. My neighbor knocks on the door with the news the bank just called them, and I'm supposed to call the bank right back because I had to give them my neighbor's number. They'd cut off our phone. So I call the bank and they tell me to come in and bring the money. I can have the loan. I get my truck. Now, I stir my coffee to hide the flash of tears. That was a miracle. He doesn't respond. Why wasn't that a miracle? Well, he says, here's my problem. He's talking fast again, avoids my eyes. I make good money now. The house is paid for. My loan's paid off. I can get my kids what they need to look good. She doesn't have to work at Walmart anymore. But to do this means I'm on the road 25 days every month. I get home. They don't know me. I'm so tired. I don't care. She thinks I don't love her anymore. I don't know what she thinks of me. You get road fever in this job. It gets so hard to go home. And after a while, you just keep driving. I've got road fever. So this morning, I pull my rig over when I see this tattoo sign and I go in and I tell the guy to fix this arm, whatever it takes. Now, I'm going to head home and try to show her I don't want us to be over. He turns his stool so we're almost face to face. Do you think, and then he tries again, do you think God cares about stuff like this? And I say my own kind of prayer, please, 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 the right words. And then his head jerks around. They're reading his number over the speakers. That means he's fueled. He has to get moving. And he picks up his bill from the counter and heads. I start talking very fast. Do you have a Bible? No, he says. I follow him to the cash register. Would you take a Bible? They're free. We give them away here. He hesitates. Take a Bible, I say. And when you get where you're going, open it up and look for the name Matthew. It's a little book in the back. Matthew, he says, like a man's name. Yeah. I hand him the Bible. Yes. Read Matthew. It has the answer to your question. What God cares about. What's the answer? He flips through the pages, waiting for the change, wondering if I'm putting him on. You have to find it. It's there. It's got your name on it. So how will I know when I find it, he says. You'll know, I say, when you find the word sparrow. You'll see what that tattoo really means. It's the permanent mark God just made on your life. A sparrow? Yeah, I say. There's a promise about sparrows in the gospel called Matthew. I watch him walk out with the Bible tucked under his decorated left arm. I never see him again, though I look for him always. I don't know if he reads it, or if it finally turns out to be a miracle. What I do know is this: as the years pass, and there are days I start to despair about the sparrows that are falling, falling, falling. The good news I offered to him sometimes returns to me. Don't be afraid. You are worth more than the sparrows.
Wow, what an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's really beautiful. And oh, what a wonderful story.
I think that's the story for now, and
Yes.
certainly the story for all of us who um, worry about the falling sparrows.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Very, very appropriate for today. So Heather, earlier you mentioned Mary Oliver's recommendation for us to pay attention. And you've certainly encapsulated that in a lot of your work. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, I love her reminder. Uh, our work, standing still and learning to be astonished. But how do you learn to pay attention, to stand still? And so I've worked out for myself over the years a kind of guideline principles. One is perception, then conception. So it reverses. You don't think about it. You look at it. You allow it to enter you. You let the sense experience come first, and then out of that it presents itself as a thought. So I think that's very important. Perception, then conception, because this is all embodied knowledge that we need to learn to trust. And the example I gave you was the glass.
Right, right.
Love to tell the story. Now, I'm a Appalachian, misplaced hillbilly. So telling the story is essential for life. How you do that. You might get around to writing it, or maybe someone else will write your stories down. But the essential is looking at, for me, the oral tradition of scripture and then seeing how that manifests in real life. Um, the Sparrow Tattoo, that's a way to read scripture in the present. You see, I see the tattoo, and then somewhere in the back of my mind, I hear, don't be afraid. So that is a way of loving to tell the story, embedding scripture so it sort of comes out of a worldview that is almost pre-conscious. And then trust ambiguity. Sometimes a story, it it doesn't have a good ending. It doesn't have an ending. And so you just have to live with the ambiguity. That's been very hard for me to learn. But trust ambiguity and then believe in the sacramental nature of life. That's the purpose of the word becoming flesh. We take commonplace things, lift them up for holy use, break them open, and oh my God, God. So those are principles.
That's very cool.
Is the
That's really helpful. And I see now what you mean by all of those.
Yes.
Well, Heather, it's really been a pleasure to spend some time with you. I really appreciate your thoughts on this and your insights, and encouraging us all to pay attention through these crazy times that we're going through. There's a lot to pay attention to, and a lot of food for thought, a lot of food for writing for people. So thank you for calling that to our attention.
All right. And may you be blessed the way you are blessing others.
Thank you. Thank you. So in the description for this video, we will include the books that Heather mentioned and also the book that she read from. So please watch for that. Heather, thank you again.